Well, joining us are the royal correspondent for Vanity Fair, Katie Nicholl, and the Sun's royal editor, Matt Wilkinson, who I think has been whizzing through an entire copy of the book. Is that right, Matt? This is a Spanish version, as I understand it.
Yeah, I've had the enormous pleasure of reading the book.
Exactly. Oh, well, you don't sound as if it was a pleasure. Tell us what you found.
No, it was. It's an incredible book, and I think you've gone through some of the main headlines here today. But I don't think I've ever read a royal book of so many revelations, and the most important thing here is there's so many revelations from a member of the royal family, and I think that's what the issue is here. There are, as Katie will tell you, there are many, many royal books. She's written some herself, but there are many, many royal books. But the problem here is that a beloved member of the family, like a treasured brother of William, a son of Charles, he's the one that is actually airing all this dirty linen. This is the problem that the royal family are facing, because there's all sorts of stories, all sorts of revelations that come out about the royal family. The problem is that a senior member of the royal family is actually making these accusations, but also revealing the private lives, the private conversations, situations with Kate and William that would normally be behind closed doors, or normally that journalists would not be allowed to report on, or if we tried to report on them, we were told it was too private. But as I say, we have a brother of William and a son of Charles that is actually making these things public, and I think that's the most aggravating element of this.
I mean, there is so much to say. We've already learnt so many extraordinary things from this book. What is a single story, if you like, that jumps out at you the most, that left you with a jaw dropping? I can certainly tell you what my take on it is, but I'd love to hear from you.
Well, the ones I think it's about Harry's life. It's about his drug taking and losing his virginity. I mean, these are things that members of the royal family don't normally talk about. You know, he's talking about his time in the army, in Afghanistan, where he was saying that he killed 25 people of the Taliban. But it's this opening up of his personal life, about the sort of tale about him losing his virginity behind a pub, and about his cocaine taking, and he's opening up elements about where he was hallucinating and talking to a bin. I mean, these are really deeply personal stories from Prince Harry.
Just unbelievable, Matt. I mean, Katie, where do we begin? How shocked are you by these revelations? I think after the sort of the Netflix documentary, you sort of thought, what else is to come out?
I think I said that, didn't I? Now I'm feeling really silly, because I didn't think that he was going to go anywhere near where he's gone. I mean, I completely agree with what Matt's just said. I mean, I've done this job now for nearly 17 years. You know, he's not the first member of the royal family to write a book, but he is certainly the only member of the royal family to have written a book this explosive. I mean, those bombshells just come thick and fast. And I think we've almost become oversaturated by Harry and Meghan and this narrative. There's just so much of it. But actually, if you try and just forget the docuseries, and if you try and put that Oprah interview to a side and you just come into this book, the idea that a senior member of the royal family would write a book like this, I mean, I would say is unthinkable. You really have to stop and think, I cannot believe what I'm reading, particularly, by the way, Isabel, the account of him losing his virginity. Unless that's a dodgy Spanish translation, I am astonished.
It is jaw-dropping. There's language in there that I'm not even sure we want to repeat for a family programme. I mean, look, you and I sort of generally have a pretty dim view of talking about Harry and Meghan the whole time, but we both agreed that this show can only be all about Harry and Meghan for tonight only, because it is utterly sensational, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, the Oprah interview was jaw-dropping, but that did focus on a sort of a short period. This spans his entire life, and I think for me, having written biographies about him and spanning those early years, it is fascinating.
You raised the question, Katie, about what's believable, and is this all believable? I mean, there were serious questions about what Meghan said in the Winfrey interview. So how much of this really is believable, or is some of it just exaggerated?
Unlike Matt, I've not had the privilege yet of reading the entire book. I mean, one inconsistency that jumped out immediately was Harry saying that after he'd been allegedly shoved to the ground and had this physical fisticuffs with his brother, his first call was to his therapist. Well, my first call would probably be to my other half, but the fact is the other half had said she wasn't allowed to see a therapist because it wasn't a good look for the royal family.
Right.
It wasn't. But actually, Harry has a therapist on speed dial.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure we will pick over the narrative, and there will be discrepancies. And I suppose we ought to point out the obvious, which is this is one person's side of the story. There are always two sides to the story, but unfortunately we're not going to get to hear the other side of Charles's narrative or William's because they're not going to go there.
Let's just come back to Matt because he has read the whole thing. I have two quick questions on that. We haven't heard much so far about what Harry has to say about the Queen and any conversations that he had with her. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that. And also, can you just elaborate on that bin story you told us about just now? You referred to Harry hallucinating, talking to a bin. I think we need to know more of that.
Yeah, we'll be hopefully putting more in the paper very shortly. But there are scenes that he has written about taking some drugs while at Eton, and it goes into quite a lot of detail about hallucinating with some friends, rolling spliffs, and talking to a bin that talks back to him. And it's like opening up a kind of scene as a teenager, addressing the kind of. But also, you speak about the Queen. I mean, he's. Let's be fair to Harry. He has always been publicly. He's always been very respectful about the Queen, and he's very respectful about the Queen in the book. You'll be seeing later that he does talk about his trip to say goodbye to the Queen, as in he talks about his trip where he went to Balmoral. There's an epilogue that I think you might be aware of, that he'd written the book over the summer. It had been signed, it had gone, but he's written an epilogue talking about when he learnt that the Queen had died, the conversations that he had with the King, and flying up without Meghan, and then saying a personal goodbye to his grandmother. And that's quite touching. I mean, again, it's a very personal story that he is revealing a lot of detail about the moments that he had with the Queen, with the Queen at Balmoral. But you're right, he's not gone in much detail on revelations about the Queen, because I don't really think that's tasteful, or there might not be any. But there are scenes where he is talking in his epilogue about being with the Queen at Balmoral.
I can't wait to hear all the detail in the paper tomorrow. Thank you very much, Matthew. And Richard, I mean...
where do we begin? What was in his mind when he thought that it was right to reveal these extraordinary details? Did he think that in the modern world it's good to reveal details about your drug taking and your virginity?
He did, because one of the things that struck me is where he says in one of his televised interviews, and we've seen the clips of them, I don't think anything can be improved by me keeping quiet. I mean, just how stupid is he? I mean, Katie, how thick is Prince Harry? Sorry to ask a blunt
Well, he didn't
question,
do terribly well in his A-levels. I mean, we know that. He didn't go on to university. He went into Sandhurst. But I don't know. I suppose a lot of people will be thinking he is incredibly deluded to have done this. I mean, the idea that he says in one sentence that the door is open for a potential return, I'm assuming for a reconciliation, that he believes in the future of the monarchy, is so incongruous with what he's doing and the impact of his words and what the impact of those words is having on the monarchy. It's almost like he is just deluded and lost in his own world.
We'll have to talk about what's he trying to achieve with all of this.
I think
apart from earning a load of cash.
Well, I mean, clearly he's gone for the big bucks. I mean, that is indisputable, and you're not going to get a $35 million book deal without spilling the beans,
haven't they?
They've certainly got their money's worth. They certainly have. But I think there was a genuine desire for him to tell his own narrative, to tell... I mean, I was told and have been told many years...
Don't you mean
his truth, his and Meghan's truth. But I do think he has felt unheard for a very long time. And just to play devil's advocate just slightly here, that idea of being the spare is something he has struggled with for a long time. I have met Harry on many occasions. He said to me before in the past, you know, I want a normal life. I want to get on the tube. I want to go and be able to buy a coffee. I want to be able to do this. He wanted everything that he didn't have, that wasn't within his birthright. And I'm afraid he has wanted all of the privileges of being royal and none of the responsibilities. And the underlying sentiment in all of this, I do not see him take responsibility for anything.
This is it. I mean, he literally wanted to have his cake and eat it at all times.
Yes, including wanting to be in the royal family and out of the royal family, making money whilst representing the Queen. It wasn't going to work. He's tried to create this third way. I don't believe it has worked.
Katie, you're going to stick around. Thank you very much.